Okay, we're back. So a little bit about the Start Strong assessments. As I mentioned, they were designed to identify students who could potentially be struggling or in need of support in the beginning of the year, and they also satisfied the federal assessment requirement. Students who were in grades 4 through 10 took these assessments in English Language Arts, and they were given in mathematics to students in grades 4 through 8. And then when we get into our high school level mathematics classes, there were assessments that correlated to those as well. Students were also required to take a science assessment in grades 6, 9, and 12, and never before have we had senior students test in science, so that was something entirely new. The Start Strong will only the first administration in the fall is the only assessment that there will be. We haven't heard anything else from the state. Other than this assessment cannot be compared to the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, and that's in particular because it has a completely different design than the assessments that are given in the spring. When students' reports were given in this assessment, they were reported out on 3 proficiency levels. A student could have received strong support may be needed, some support may be needed, or less support may be needed. So those after-school programs that I mentioned were offered to students whose score fell in the strong support may be needed categories. But I want to talk a little bit about the assessment design here of the Start Strong. English Language Arts only had 10 questions to assess students, and it wasn't in writing at all. It was just assessing students in the areas of reading, both nonfiction and fiction. Mathematics, we had about 22 to 24 questions, and science, there were approximately 25 questions. So we're not talking about as lengthy of an assessment as the New Jersey Student Learning Assessments or what was previously referred to as PARCC. You could see the content that was assessed in all 3 of those areas. And please recognize that the mathematics class that students are in right now, they were given an assessment for what the state deemed to be the prerequisite course. So our students who are in geometry in grade 8 were given an assessment that was aligned to the grade 8 standards, which were heavily infused with pre-algebra standards and assessments of the knowledge in that area. So we're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward, but the state determined which assessments students take in mathematics. The scoring, there was different point values for each of the assessments, but overall, if there was the option for multiple answers to be given to a question and students missed one of those answers, students did not receive any credit there. However, questions that had multiple parts, like a 1A and a 1B, if students answered part of that question correctly, they were given partial credit for those multi-part questions. So it's important that we take a look at where we are with regard to the state, and these results were just released last week. But when you look at Chatham in the blue, you could see that we are far less in need of strong support than the state average, where you see that even in grade 4, you have students above 40%, whereas in Chatham, we're below 20%. So when we take a look at English Language Arts and we take a look at this bar graph, we have less support, some support, and strong support. You could see that although we can't compare Start Strong directly to New Jersey Student Learning Assessments, we're seeing a similar trend. We have a very small population of students who scored strong support may be needed. And these students, when the administrative team and I sat down and we went over the roster of who these students are, in many cases, actually in almost all cases, none of this was surprising to us. We had students who were in either being serviced in special ed or basic skills or who were targeted for more intervention. So this wasn't a big surprise or a shock to us. In mathematics, we have a similar trend to that of the state. We have a higher percentage of students who need strong support in grade 8 mathematics and in Algebra 1. And that's particularly because these students who are in grade 8 tend to struggle with mathematics. And the students who are in Algebra 1 this year were in grade 8 math. So these are the students who historically have needed more support over time and who are, in fact, receiving support because they're in a grade 8 math where they're going to be instructed in the pre-algebra skills that were actually assessed on the Start Strong. Couple things to consider about math. Unlike ELA and science, again, not all students at a given grade level took the same Start Strong assessment, so that ended up affecting the N, or the population. So in some cases, you see grade 8 has a much smaller population of students of 61 than to the geometry classes of 540. And when you have a number of a smaller population, the percentage is increased. I also want to make note that our math sequence changed this year. So for the first time ever, students in grade 8 are taking geometry. So the majority of the students in grades 8 to 9 are in geometry. So we have that larger population. That's what's comprising that 540 N population. So the bar graph shows the similar findings to the line graph when we compare to the state. The grade 8 in the algebra is higher than the geometry, but our algebra 2, we barely have any students who identified as strong support may be needed. And when we had the content area supervisors drill down to this data, they not only looked at the actual questions on the assessment and how students performed, because never before have we ever had that kind of information. We were only given students' results. We were never able to see the questions or what they scored. But our supervisors, again, they took this roster of students and they cross-referenced student grades in the classes. For ELA, we looked at running records, scores, and again, we were not surprised with any of the findings here. Again, science was tested in grades 6, 9, and 12. The state also requires that we report out on subgroup data. Our largest subgroups in the school district of the Chathams are Hispanic, Asian, 2 or more races, and we have our special education population. So the next couple of slides that I go through are going to take you through those subgroups. And we didn't see, the purpose of looking at subgroups is to see if there's any kind of gap between certain populations, and we are not finding any significant gap within our population of students, other than we have very small subgroup populations. So when we're talking about the number of students who are Hispanic, we're not talking about large numbers. So again, if you have 4 students in a population of 20, that's going to make the percent go up a little higher. But we've drilled down and we've looked at all this data carefully, and we're not concerned with any kind of achievement gap. So here's Hispanic in math, Hispanic in science. These slides will be on the website if you want to take a closer look at them. This is our Asian population. Again, even though we can't measure this directly against New Jersey student learning assessments, we know that from that assessment, our Asian population tends to do very well and is usually in the advanced proficient range. And this is our 2 or more races. We had less than 10 in grade 10, so we're not to report out on that data because that becomes a confidentiality matter, because you could potentially identify that population if it's less than 10. In mathematics, we see the same trends. In science. And finally, our special education population. So just to let everybody know, again, this was one data point of student assessment. Again, nothing was shocking, but we are taking a close look at our students in the district, offering them this after-school support program if they so choose to be part of it. And also, we've sent the message home to our teachers that we need to teach students where they are right now, because we know they've had a couple bumpy years, and we want to make sure that we're really addressing not only their academic needs, but also their social, emotional needs as well. So thank you very much. Again, you can find this presentation on the website. Mr. Devine will take all questions.
Where'd they go? Oh, thank Karen and Sean, Dr. Chase and Mr. Devine, thank you for your hard work on that. We appreciate it. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. Again, just to reiterate, nobody in this district in the education space was waiting for this assessment to be mandated before determining if students needed support. The educators and the administration has offered support long before this assessment. It's nice to see there was no surprises, but this was more of a checking a box, and it was, you know, more formative than it was testing achievement. So thank you for your effort. Thank you for reporting it out. But again, it's no surprise that there was no surprises. Mike?
Sure. So of course, the rest of my report really is just a status check on the schools. It's hard to believe that our last board meeting, I think, was December 10th or 13th, something like that. And if you look at the school year so far, really up through Thanksgiving, we were running pretty smoothly, and we were registering about 16 cases of COVID per month through Thanksgiving. And now since December 15th, we've had over 500, if I am doing the math right. So Omicron arrived in Chatham and kind of exploded the frameworks that we've been dealing with. And it's put a lot of pressure on the system, because when you have a lot of cases, you have school nurses that are involved in contact tracing and notification. You have students who need to be on the live stream to follow along what's going on in class once they're feeling up to it. And of course, the students being sick are only half the equation. The other half are the staff members who have become ill. And given the fact that we have, you know, a shortage in substitute teaching staff and other staff members, when you have a large number of staff that go down, it puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the staff to cover each other, and on all the schools just to try to march forward. So it's been a difficult few weeks, and different schools are impacted on different days. Today it was Lafayette Avenue School and Milton Avenue School that were in the roughest shape. Thursday, which was the day before the snowstorm, it was the middle school and Washington Avenue School. So it's just a day-to-day type of chore to try to make sure that we've got students covered and classes running as best we can. And I've been in touch with Ms. Grant pretty much on a nightly basis and then a 6 a.m. basis to kind of find out where we are and then send reinforcements out to the schools as we need them. So we're going to keep on keeping on and trying to make our way forward. We had a real surge in staff cases over the holidays, and the number of positives among the staff have started to ebb now. And we had a number of staff rejoin us today. We'll have more coming back tomorrow. We're hopeful that we've gotten through the worst of it, knock wood, and that we can keep moving on and kind of have more stability as each day goes on. In addition to all that, excuse me, as everyone I think knows, the CDC updated its guidance over the holiday break. There was some confusion around that for a variety of reasons. The New Jersey Department of Health directed us not to implement any of the CDC guidance yet, because they were going to furnish school districts and daycare settings and so forth with school-specific guidance. That came out this afternoon. We haven't had time to fully digest that yet, but it does move toward a shorter quarantine and isolation period, both for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. So we're going to continue to kind of look at that and implement the changes as soon as we can. On Friday, as I've shared with board members, we didn't receive, but CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, put out its own set of recommendations. And of course, that's not an agency, it's not a government agency that we typically would follow. But similar to the American Academy of Pediatrics, CHOP is a very widely recognized and well-respected pediatric setting for kids. And their guidance also is much more, I think, reflective of what Omicron is doing and the importance of keeping schools open and kids in schools regardless of vaccination status. So we're still digesting all of that. I've gotten a little bit of legal feedback from our attorneys. I'll share some of that with you later on. And I just want to update the board that we're working through things as best we can. We're committed to keeping the schools in session for students because we know that that's what's best for them. The staff has been wonderful in that regard, in helping each other and in being there for kids. And we'll continue to do that and continue to implement whatever changes that we can so that we are able to keep more kids in school as much as possible. I'll end just by saying that once this week ends, our hope is that we go back to the way we were operating a few weeks ago, meaning we will discontinue live streaming from classrooms, from all classrooms. The only live streams we would be doing would be for those students who test positive for COVID or are identified as close contacts in the school setting. We'll discontinue the lunch excusal for students in K-8 and the open campus for students in grades 9, 10, and 11 at the high school. And we'll try to get back into the rhythm that we were in right up until the week before the break. We think that that's what's best for students and also for teachers. And provided that we can kind of stabilize or remain stable and move in a better direction, we're hopeful that we can do that when we return from the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. And that's it for now.
Nothing additional on school start times?
Thank you for bringing that up.
Every meeting.
I was in touch with a pediatrician regarding school start times who is delighted to come and maybe speak with us. He said he's in the midst of COVID as a doctor and couldn't do that quite yet, but as soon as things ease up for him a little bit, he'll be happy to be here. We continue to just toss around some ideas, around what benefits the school start time could provide and what we might have to work through with regard to some staffing issues. And we haven't made a ton of progress because we had the holiday break in between, but we'll continue to do that, and I can give a broader update at the next meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And thank you for your update. Just from the board perspective, I just want to, again, show our appreciation or tell our appreciation to we have some teachers here in the audience, the teachers, the administrators, the paraprofessionals, the substitutes, the maintenance staff. I mean, you guys have gone above and beyond, and we are so appreciative. And again, the goal is to keep kids in school at all costs. We have said that since the pandemic started, so we're going to keep on keeping on, as Mike just said. The goal is in-person learning, and in his brief letter to parents last week, it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to do the best we can. And again, this is all because of the teaching staff, pulling together and just doing what is necessary. I'm sure it doesn't meet every contractual, to the letter of the law, but they've been stepping up and doing everything to keep our kids in school in person. So thank you. Oh, sure, go ahead, Michelle.
I just want to make sure, is this working? Just to go back to the live stream, I want to make sure that our community clearly understands what qualifies, because it's not fair to teachers when kids are popping on screens and are not necessarily, it's like a surprise party. They're all of a sudden on the screen. Are they on the list? Are they not? And teachers should not have to navigate that. So I want to make sure that the COVID is going to go back to the 24-hour window once the teachers have time to prepare, and then go virtual versus a continuous live stream. So I think we need to be proactive in our communication with our teachers, our staff, our parents, so that everybody knows what to expect when I'm not using the word normal, when we return to our prior standard of what qualified for virtual learning.
Will do.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Football game? Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Mike. So I look forward to hearing more about start times and bringing in some of those experts you spoke about. Peter, over to you for a construction update.
Sure, very quickly on the agenda tonight, resolution number B9. The district had opened bids last week for the high school nurse's office renovation, and that project will be funded in the 22-23 budget. The construction is slated to begin Monday, June 20th, which is the first day after graduation, and the contractor has already been informed he needs to be finished by the middle of August. On another note, due to a little miscommunication, we were notified by PSE&G today that at Southern Boulevard School, the path that leads out the back by Colony Pool will be closed in the afternoon for the next 2 weeks while they continue and finish pulling the wires over the new power poles. So Principal O'Connor was going to send a notice out that the path would be closed in the afternoons.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
great, thank you, Peter. Since it's freezing out, I assume there's less kids walking back that way.
No, it's a lot of kids.
But still go
That'll be
through
a mess out in front of Southern Boulevard.
it. Okay, do we have somebody stationed there at the end of the day to ensure that the kids don't walk through?
Construction company has set up barricades.
Yeah, I just meant,
And there is a construction of their.
my kids would go right under that barricade.
Is it just is it just the, under by the power lines, or can the kids still walk up back through the playground, through the field, and out, there's a path there too?
Anything back there, if they're pulling the lines, is closed.
The barricade is set up between, what is that,
Dale
Spring
Drive.
Street and,
So it's Dale Drive all the way through?
So you can't get on the Dale Drive path to
Oh,
the back of the school.
I didn't realize, oh
From
yeah,
Dale
that's a
Drive to the
problem.
back of the school. you
That's
can't
gonna
get.
be a logistical
Everyone's going to
nightmare.
have to go out
on the other
front.
side too, from where the EMS, there's another path there you can't get through.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
I know that last week when they were doing the helicopter flyover, a lot of the parents were just driving their kids back and forth to school. Or, I'm sorry, driving their kids in the afternoon or picking them up,
Okay,
because the path was closed.
okay.
And that's all I had.
Okay, thanks. Mike, do you know if Kathleen or anybody from the Southern Boulevard will, I know the pickup line is staffed. Is there somebody to make sure kids don't walk up that way? Or can those folks do that, or they can't do both?
I'd have to ask her about who's out there in the afternoon
Okay.
on bus duty.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And it would only take about 10 or 10 minutes
Yeah.
just to make sure, I mean, some of those kids are 6 years old.
Yeah, I'm sure we can use Mr. Davis in the afternoon to.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Steer kids
Just to
the
be
right way.
sure, just to be on the safe side. Great, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Committee reports, we're going to go with the previous committee chairs for the committee reports, but then when we move the items, Michelle, if you would switch to curriculum. I think only 2 committees met, personnel and curriculum. Ms. Ciccarelli for personnel?
Yes, we met on December 20th. Basically, we discussed the sub shortage and how the administration was working on solutions to ensure that we have coverage in all the schools. And we are meeting again on the 19th.
19th. Oh, yeah, Wednesday, 19th. Ms. Kenny, would you mind doing your final curriculum
Yes.
public report out?
We met also on December 20th. Dr. Chase did her presentation. She previewed the presentation that we just saw today about the Start Strong results. Dr. LaSousa talked to us about start times, and we had a brief discussion about the senior internship program.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Ryan, did finance or policy meet? No.
Policy has not met since the last meeting. However, I did want to mention, we had an omission of a policy that we were reviewing from the December 13th meeting. We started to review the transgender
Oh, yes.
policy. So I wanted to put that on record tonight as we're reviewing it. As we go along, we'll probably have a first reading
Okay.
at the next board meeting.
And is it on tonight's agenda for the first reading?
No.
Oh, it's not
We
on.
left it off because I didn't mention it in the last meeting.
Got it, okay. Excellent. And no finance committee meeting, right?
No.
No, very good, thank you. I don't have any liaisons, anything, does any, oh, you do? Go ahead. Also, your last report out, as Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Ross will be taking over after this, so bring us home strong, Ms. Kenny.
Let's see how I do. Okay, so Winter Wonderland took place last month, and it was a wonderful success with over 1,500 people in attendance. CEF would like to thank the wonderful borough community for hosting an evening of fun and holiday cheer for the entire family. CEF is accepting applications for trustees and volunteers for 2022 and 2023. CEF is looking for leaders and community volunteers to serve on its donor relations and endowment committees, event committees, grant committee, communications committee, donor database management, and finance audit committees. CEF is successful due to the commitment of the many volunteers that have dedicated themselves to CEF's mission, which is enhancing public education with private funding. Should you have an interest in joining CEF as a trustee or volunteer, please complete and return the trustee volunteer application found on our website at chathamedfoundation.org by January 31st. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Then, just moving along, I'd like to make a motion to move the minutes of the December 13th public session and the executive session, the minutes.
I second.
Michelle seconded, and we're just going to do Ann and Lotta. You were both not present, so if you wouldn't mind abstaining. Peter, would you just do a
Sure, the
roll call vote
minutes,
on this one?
regular and executive session from 12:13, Ms. Ciccarelli,
Abstain.
Ms. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro,
Yes.
Ms. Kenny,
Abstain?
Ms. Ross,
Abstain.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and Ms. Weber.
Yes.
The items pass 503.
Great, thank you. We have our first opportunity for public comment. Hearing of the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And just as a reminder, the public commentary is an opportunity for citizens to make a comment. We're not going to interrupt, and we'll try and address or answer anything after we close the public commentary section. So thank you very much. If you could introduce yourself, name and sign
Pete,
in.
please.
There's a sign in there.
Good evening. I'm James Hitchings. I'm with George Iannuzzi and Marianne Masumi. We are teachers at Chatham Middle School and members of the Chatham Education Association. We'd like to thank the board and Dr. LaSousa for your time this evening. After a crazy week returning from winter break, I'm sure I can speak for everyone when I say that we are hopeful that we've crossed over to the other side of the mountain and things are starting to look up for us in the Chatham community. The past few weeks have been challenging for everyone, but despite these challenges, the staff of the schools in the district have remained committed to providing experiences that go above and beyond expectations, not just for our students, but for our community as well. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the positive work association members have been doing. Members have been covering a large volume of classes in order to keep schools open during the past few weeks. Our secretaries continue to work diligently to ensure each class has coverage. Teachers have implemented live streaming for their classes so that students can stay engaged while they are at home. They continue to communicate with counselors, nurses, and support staff to ensure that the students who may be struggling are getting the help that they need. The counselors and support staff meet with students both in person and virtually to continue the crucial work that they do. Our custodians and maintainers are being called at a moment's notice to disinfect spaces, and they continue to make sure that our buildings are clean and ready for people to be in them each day. And of course, our nurses are handling the immense workload of processing positive cases and contact tracing as the pandemic continues. I am grateful and proud to work with such hardworking and supportive colleagues, and that we are committed to our students and to one another.
In addition to this positive work, we also wanted to highlight some exciting grants and programs occurring throughout the district. The association continues to use Pride and FAST grants to provide meaningful experiences for the community. FAST grants funds are being used for our upcoming speaker for elementary guardians and parents on January 18th. The CEA will be holding a food drive during the week of January 24th. In early February, FAST grant funds will be used to hold a paint night for Washington Avenue families. At Chatham Middle School, where the three of us all work, we have held monthly Workout Wednesday fundraisers to raise money for various charitable causes, with one coming up this coming Wednesday. We also held a fundraising drive to donate money to CMS families in need during the holiday season. Lastly, while not a grant or charitable program, I also would like to promote the Chatham Middle School all-school production of Frozen Junior, which will be occurring the first weekend of February, with ticket sales going out late next week. Our goal is to show students and their families that even in challenging times, we can still have positive, meaningful experiences together.
Lastly, we'd like to close out by thanking the community and guardians and parents for their support during the past few weeks, especially those who have offered gestures of kindness and gratitude or who have expressed their appreciation before the board. or who have even reached out to check in on our mental health during these difficult times. Thank you also to all of you up there for the kind words this evening. They mean a lot. The past few years have been difficult for everybody, and the collective thanks help us continue in our mission to provide the best possible education for the students of this district. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming out tonight. I know you're on your 14th or 16th hour of your workday, so thank you for coming out.
Hi, I'm Mark Lois. I'm Chatham Township. I wanted to just say congratulations to Ms. Ross for her appointment, and thank you for serving in our community. I know that you're going to serve here, and you've served in many other capacities at the library and with the schools, and we very much appreciate the volunteerism that our community runs on, that all the participation you've done and will do. I have sent something in earlier today, and I won't go through the technicals about certain court cases and exposures to liability and with this appointment process. And I really just want to speak about the future and specifically to the policy committee about making policy for the future, especially the spirit of OPMA, the Open Public Meetings Act. The spirit of that is really that the public can see what is being done at elected officials' meetings, and specifically the actions you take. And certainly there are executive sessions and personnel issues and things that need to be done in private or shouldn't be as public. But for something like appointing someone to a publicly elected position, that position would normally be subject to a great amount of scrutiny, and as was said here earlier today, plastering your name around the community. That's part of becoming an elected official. And although that's messy, and although it's painful, especially to families, it is also allows for criticism to come out in the community and allows for us collectively, through free speech, to become better. Without that criticism, without that free flow, we can't become better. So as a policy, we need to embrace the spirit of the election process, even in the appointment. So to keep the names private of people that are volunteering to take an otherwise elected position defeats the purpose of having elections or having an appointment that represents an elected official. I think also that a public body such as this appointing someone is within open public meetings means that people are going to be watching what you're doing and can make sense of it. The newspaper had already reported in December 15th who you had chosen. So the actual choice that's happened here today is clearly was made earlier. And even at the last meeting on the 13th, Mr. Ryan admitted that the choice had not been made, and it would be made in the future. So it makes it very difficult for the public to understand how these decisions are made, or how these decisions are open and public. It seems inaccurate to the spirit of OPMA. So I would ask you, how could you possibly shape policy in the future to be closer to that spirit of OPMA? And then the next thing I would like to talk about is just to go back to the pilots. I had talked a lot about the payments in lieu of taxes, and I talked about the 259 units that were being built, and then the thousands more that may be built on River Road, and that could severely change the funding formula for the schools. And I'm asking you again now, I have now for 3 meetings, what else has been done to pursue that? What can be done? What help do you need? What would you like for the public to do? And what support do you need as a board in order to address those pilots and to get to a situation much like Cranford, which has taking, not only are they taking a percentage commensurate with the tax rate, in that case it's 55%, they're actually getting a bonus of 20% over that for the first 2 years from the pilot. So in other words, they're taking 75% of the pilot in the first 2 years, and then after that it scales down to match the rateable rate in their community at 55% of the pilot.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? There we go, Mr. Heap.
Good evening and Happy New Year to all. Bill Heap from Chatham Borough. I'd like to welcome Ms. Ross to the board. This is not an easy job. Sometimes it's a very thankless job, so good for you for stepping up. I look forward to meeting you in the future, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm going to put my JC hat on for a minute. We had another successful tree sale, sold out as early as I can remember. We would have sold more if I could get my hands on them. We couldn't. And as a matter of fact, I got an email this morning from our supplier down in Virginia. He told me if I didn't put it in an order by the end of next week, they would probably be sold out for next year at the end of January. So the sale hasn't even ended or just ended, and now we're starting all over again. The last thing is I would like to thank all of the people that helped out. It was a real community effort. We had the Boy Scouts, Troop 8, Troop 28, Troop 280, and all of the adults involved, as well as the Scouts. We had the Key Club, Izzy Alvarez, Sam Kaplan were the leaders. And I'd like to also thank Lawrence Trupo. And we had some alumni come back to help us out, Owen Trupo and Paul Dannenberg, who is our IT guy. He handles all of the stuff that I know nothing about, our Venmo account and our social media and everything else. So it worked out really well, and we thank everybody who patronized the sale. And finally, I have sensed, I think, a shift in attitude on the part of the rest of the country. They are finally coming around to what we already knew here in Chatham, that keeping schools open was critical for our children. There are so many kids this past 2 years who have gotten the short end of the stick because schools were closed. So I really thank you for being brave and going against the trend. It wasn't easy back then, and you stood up and did it. So thank you. And we'll get through this, where I think we're on the downward curve on this current situation. My house was riddled with plague over the holiday. My daughter brought it home from Indianapolis, but we got through it. It was not a big deal. So good on you for staying open.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? No? Excellent. Okay, great. We're going to close the public commentary section, and there's another one at the end. We have two here at the Board of Education. So if something pops up and it strikes your fancy, please jump in. Mr. Ryan, did you want to make any comment on the policy questions?
Yeah, I just want to, for the record, I appreciate Mr. Loris's comments. However, I did not say that the selection was made. What I said at the meeting was nobody was nominated and nobody was appointed. Clearly, Ms. Clark and her committee selected someone at that meeting. I did not say that the selection had not been made. I said there was no nomination and there was no appointment. Just for the record.
Yeah, and again, we checked with our attorneys. We covered it several times. We covered it again a little bit deeper this time just to make sure, because there is some language that Mr. Ryan is going to work on in the policy. Yeah. But again, there's no reason for the borough representatives to interject themselves into the township residents' decision to fill a spot. So it wouldn't be an open, we wouldn't have that in an open, especially in a regional district. If we were, I don't know if Mr. Lowe's was here at the beginning of the meeting, we went through this already. If it was a smaller board and there was only 5 of us and 1 or 2 people resigned, then you'd have to do it in a full session, in which case you would have the interview process in public. We have always operated in every capacity on a committee structure, and it makes perfect sense that the municipality where the vacancy is, the committee is made up of the members from that municipality. No offense, but who am I from the resident to tell Michelle Clark who she should interview or nominate from a township? We have 2 municipalities, so in this instance, it makes perfect sense. And again, we've worked with our attorneys. I've communicated with them. Peter has communicated with them. Mike Ryan at length has communicated with them. So we're on solid footing. We always have public commentary, so we appreciate the comments. But again, we have a nominating committee that does the interviewing, and then they make a recommendation, and then the full board votes on it. So again, thank you, Mr. Ryan, for I know you're going to work on that. Whether it takes a week, a month, 6 months, you know.
And 2 different municipalities, that's really the only way to do it.
Right.
Right? In this case, there were 4 members of the committee who were overwhelmingly elected by the residents of the township that made the selection. The point would be moot to say, you know, we have to parade all the candidates in front of the board for everyone to vote. It only requires 1 more vote at that point. So, yes, you know, we're going to work on the policy to make sure it's clearer and fairer and as transparent as it can be, but the process right now works.
Right. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. And the only other, the pilot, I would ask Mr. Lois go back to all of the meetings at the beginning of 2021, January, February, March. We reviewed a lot of the pilot program. We are working with the borough. The fact of the matter is the governing body of the borough doesn't have to share a cent with the school district, not 1 cent. They have been committed to ensuring that the school district is not negatively impacted, but there are elected officials in the borough, there's elected officials in the township. The borough is working with the Board of Education, with the borough resident representatives, because again, the township residents really shouldn't have their hands in the pocket of the borough residents. So the borough is going to, you know, maybe offset some of that cost, and again, we're still working with our elected officials in the borough to see what that offset, whether it's a percentage, whether it's a dollar amount, whether it's annually reviewed, you know, reviewed every couple of years. But again, it's 2 different governing bodies. They don't have to, we can't demand a seat at the table. You must give us a dime. You must give us dollars. Can we work with them when we ask them? Yes. Have they been extremely forthright and open? Of course, the pandemic aside, it's been a little difficult. We will continue to work with our borough representatives, but again, I live in the borough. I represent the borough residents. It's a little hard for me to come up here and say, hey, you've got to give us $200,000 a year that will benefit the entire, both towns, including the township, and the township doesn't have a pilot program. It's not contributing, even talking about contributing a dime. So it's, you know, it's a little difficult to say you must do this and you must do that, and how do you know, you tell us what you need and we're going to demand money from the borough. So we're going to work with our elected officials in the borough. We're going to continue to work with our administration. And it's, again, you can't really determine the cost of each student that's going to be in that housing. One student could, you know, add, you know, $5,000 in services. Another student could require an outplacement, which could be upward to $100,000 a year. So it's something that has to be considered annually and based on the students that are coming from those departments, from those apartments. And the demographer said there should be about 40. And if 40 kids are dispersed evenly throughout all the grades and very little special services, well, you could probably absorb that in the budget. If some of the students require outplacement and there's upwards of $1 million, well, that's a different conversation. So we're going to continue, and I'm looking to my right here, and to Chris, as the borough representatives, we're going to continue to work the process. But again, we don't have a legal right to demand any of that money. That's not to say the borough council hasn't been extremely forthright in saying that they're going to work with this school district, work with Dr. LaSousa in how to ensure that there's no negative impact by the River Road. Mike, you kind of led some of those meetings. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, so, the question, Ms. Weber, as you said, we're not entitled to any of it, and we're very lucky that the elected officials on the Borough Council are agreeable to helping us. They've said it over and over again. They've committed to it. They're going to do it. The question is, what's the percentage of the pilot that comes to us? And we have some preliminary numbers that we shared with them that we would like to see, and we'll see where that goes.
And it depends, right, Mike, when they're open for business, when one of the first students comes here. I don't need an answer today because there's no students coming today.
That's right.
Oh, absolutely, Chris.
I'm newer to the board as well. Is there a finite amount of apartments going in over there?
259.
250.
If you want to look back at my presentation from January 11th of 2021, I've got colorful slides that show you all kinds of information.
221.
59.
259,
sorry. Okay. And again, it's not just River Road. We're concerned about Post Office Plaza, Charlie Brown's, the skate park, Dixie-Dale, Noe Pond property. I don't know why we're harping on that. We've got all kinds of development coming down the road, much of it in the township, much of it that's going to put a strain on Southern Boulevard School. So let's not focus all of our energies on what the borough's doing, because to the school district, it's one town. It's one school district. We need to ensure that we have an efficient education for our students and make it fair for all the residents in both towns. Any other comments on that? Again, we did presentations early in 2021 on this, so if you want to go back and look those up, that would be great. Any other comments on that? No. Nope, excellent. Okay, great. So, okay, so we're going to move on to the regular agenda, and Lotta, we're going to pass the baton over to Michelle, have Michelle move these curriculum items. Okay, excellent, very good. So we're going to start with personnel. Ms. Ciccarelli.
So I'm going to move action items A1 to A25 on the regular agenda and A21 and 22 on the addendum. But Peter, what am I doing with A12?
All right, just to chime in, and item A12 is being withdrawn, so it is being stricken from the agenda, so there's going to be no vote on A12.
Nothing under, okay.
There's item A21 is additional items. A22 on the addendum replaces what's on the agenda, so there's less people getting the extra class stipend, and A26 is a new item.
Can I ask a question about A21? Where are these supervisory roles? Are they at every elementary school? Are they at one school? I don't see where it says that.
I have to punt that to Ms. Grant.
I'm sorry.
Southern.
They're all at Southern Boulevard? Okay, thank you.
Peter, you said A12, right?
A12 is being stricken from the agenda.
Okay, great, thank you.
Did you get a second? I did not.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Ann? Mike, you have a comment here? You're going to make
Just a quick good luck to the two people on the agenda who are retiring. They're valued members of our staff, for sure. And if you were talking about 821, Michelle, that's a mix of schools. A couple middle school, Lafayette, Washington, so it's just a mix of folks.
Oh.
For
On the
openings
agenda?
right now, for positions that are not staffed right now for one reason or another.
No, she was talking
No,
about that.
I'm talking
She's
about
talking
A21
the
on
stipends.
the personnel agenda, on the addendum, about.
21 on the addendum.
It was the extra duty stipends for play areas and bus supervisors.
Sorry.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay,
Those are,
so-
the ones on the regular agenda are a mix, and the ones on the addendum are Southern.
All Southern, that's all I need, because it didn't have a school attached. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions on personnel? No? Go ahead, Peter.
Agenda items A1 to A11, 13 to 25, and then the addendum items on 21, 22, and 26. Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Mrs. Kenny.
Yes.
Ms. Ross.
Abstain.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items passed, 701.
Great, thank you. I hate to run an audible. Bradley, would you be able to move the finance item?
Mike.
Not yet.
Mike.
Yeah, you are.
Isn't Bradley on finance also?
I'm on policy and personnel.
You've been promoted to finance.
You're on finance now, then. huh?
You want to move it?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd like to move action items B1 to B11 for vote.
A second.
Any additional questions on any of those items? No donations. Excellent. Go ahead, Peter.
Agenda items B1 through B11. Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Ms. Ross.
Abstain.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items passed, 701.
Great. And the reason I asked Bradley is because he's now on finance, and Mr. Ryan is going to move policy as the chair of policy. But moving over to curriculum, Michelle, as the new
Yep.
chair of curriculum, would you please move those items?
Yes, I move items C1 through C5 on the regular agenda.
Second.
Not much to-
Any questions on any of those items? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? You got that, Peter?
Duly noted, passes 701 with Ms. Ross abstaining.
Great, thank you. And finally, over to Mr. Ryan for policy.
I'd like to move action item D1 on the regular agenda for a vote.
Second.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan, on the policy that you mentioned earlier on transgender, will that appear on another agenda in the future?
Different agenda, yeah.
A different agenda altogether? Okay, very good, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Ryan or anybody on policy? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Ms. Ross abstains.
Duly
Excellent.
noted, passes 701.
Great. So we're up to board business. Does anybody have anything? Michelle?
Want to say what an amazing event was held on December 15th in town, put off by the Music Boosters. It seems like it was a lifetime ago, but I saw Mr. Heap there. It really was so beautifully attended by just people of all ages, people with baby carriages, senior citizens, and the weather was perfect. The students were amazing. It just, I think, really showed this town came together, and it was kind of like before everything felt like it was falling apart, but the kids were so excited to showcase their talents and be given an audience, and they had a huge audience. So I know a lot of work went into that, and just every single person that had their hand in that, it was so appreciated by so many people. And I hope that when this pandemic is in the past, long behind us, that this is something that perhaps stays, and that we can, really celebrate the holidays in our downtown with kids of all levels, all citizens, and it's open to everybody. So it was wonderful. It really was.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. It was a little Mayberry,
It really was.
downtown Mayberry. It
You
was
were there a
interesting.
lot, right? Yeah.
Any other items for board business other than never having a reorg meeting during a national football ever again? Just want to throw that out there again. Okay, we do have a quick executive session, so don't look at your phones on the score and. No public commentary? No, we have a second opportunity. I just don't want the board folks to disappear, and I don't want them to tell me the score of the game either. So we have our second opportunity for public commentary. If you again just introduce yourself, and that would be great.
Again, Mark Lois, Chatham Township. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit more about the pilots because some of the information that I had left with you in the past maybe needs to be refreshed. The 259 units that are on the 2.5 acres are 100 units per acre. There's an additional 30 acres there that has been set aside. And the reason why we want to get ahead of things and not wait until after kids start maybe moving in there or maybe start even coming to the schools to negotiate what percentage you're going to get is that the pilot program allows you, the payment in lieu of taxes allows you to take a percentage of the gross revenue from those projects. Now, the gross revenue is set at a statutory minimum of 10%, and that's the exact percentage that the borough has negotiated on this 259-unit project. It does not need to be 10%. It could be 11 or 12 or 13 or 15 or 17% of the gross revenues. And if the school district was to do what the National School Board Association recommends, which is to get a seat early and to negotiate in good faith, that percentage from the developer would go up. The money would not come from the community, but it would rather come from the project itself. So that's the reason to get way ahead. The other reason to get way ahead is that we have the other 30 acres that are going to be redeveloped. And there's a lot of math here, so let me just help you. 30 acres at 100 units per acre, like that 2.5 acres, is 3,000 units. That's greater than the number of deliverable addresses in the borough today. As far as what Chatham Township contributes compared to Chatham Borough and how we shared these schools, it's shared on a valuation basis. So it's the taxes that we pay on the values of your homes, okay? And the way that works out is, regardless of the number of students that come to the schools, Chatham Township pays roughly 58% of the schools. So, as you can see, if you were to be able to run a pilot, create hundreds, maybe thousands of units, have a payment in lieu of taxes that goes directly to the borough. They pay nothing to the library. They pay nothing to the rec program. They pay nothing to the schools. It would be disastrous for our community. And so that's why I'm here talking about it ad nauseum and really bothering everyone with these numbers. Because if you look at it like I look at it with a 5-year-old, and you look at 13, 15, 20 years from now, that's a severely different Chatham community. And that's why I'm here. So I think we can be forthright and open, and we can say they're going to have goodwill, but then we also need to be smart. And when I'm asking the board, I'll ask you again, what can parents do? What can I do? What can we do as a community to encourage you to make this an urgent matter, to go and represent not as a divided board with a committee here and a committee there, but just as you vote, just as you are elected, just as the school is one thing, to act in unison, the township portion, the borough portion, together, and speak on behalf of the school and the system for our students about these pilots.
Bill Heap, once again, I'm back. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Lois for volunteering to spend the borough's money. As a member of the planning board, I don't know of anything in the works right now to add an additional 3,000 units. That's a bit of hysteria. But I would like to talk about a little bit about the pilot program. Last meeting, I was quoted as characterizing the school district as greedy. And I do think that calls for a little bit of context. So I will repeat some remarks I made in front of the Borough Council a couple of months ago. About 3 or 4 years ago, this board put forth the proposition that somehow they were not participating in any increase in ratables that might accrue to the town or the borough. And I think you were particularly jealous of the fact that a 1960s ranch paying $10,000 was being knocked down in favor of a McMansion suddenly paying $30,000, and that you felt that you were entitled to a piece of that action. This got around, you know, in various ways, the Education Foundation newsletter and so forth, and it gave the impression that somehow the school district was getting the short end of the stick. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The idea that you don't participate in this, or that you should participate in this, is it's a certain kind of truth, the fact that you don't. It is a half-truth, an incomplete truth, a misleading truth, and an irrelevant truth. It's irrelevant. Of course you don't participate, because that's not the way the system works. You present a budget, you formulate it, you present it to the town and the borough. They, through their taxing authority, raise funds in order to meet the demands of that budget. You get what you ask for. You don't get a penny more or a penny less. You are first in line. You have a senior position. That's a nice place to be. The pilot program is a horse of a different color, and that allows certainly for a lot more flexibility. The language in that generally reads, the borough may, the borough can, not the borough shall or the borough must. So in essence, what is going to happen here is a pile of unrestricted funds will be put in the middle of a table. On one side of the table will be elected officials. On the other side, there will be a group of people with their hand out, including you, and you won't be the only one. And that, in my judgment, is a recipe for a food fight. This affordable housing business has been a rolling train wreck for the last 30 years. Anybody and everybody associated with it gets a failing grade as far as I'm concerned. Elected officials wanted nothing to do with this. They went AWOL. They threw it over into the lap of the judiciary. And of course, we all know that judges aren't accountable to anybody, and God forbid you disagree with what they say or what they rule. You're a racist or a bigot or even worse. After 30 years of negotiations and renegotiations, of lawsuits and countersuits, of arguments and counter-arguments, they have finally brought the hammer down. And from the perspective of a member of the planning board, I can tell you that when you are standing in front of a fair housing firing squad, you don't have much room to move. Some adult decisions have to be made. Nobody is happy with this. Absolutely nobody. It will affect everyone. So for you to portray yourself as a victim of all this, I find, well, a little bit much. You presented a series of what-ifs at a meeting last fall, mainly based on what if the school population increases. Fair question. Absolutely fair question. We're going to know that when we know it. I think you can read all the studies you want from Rutgers, but I think it's pure speculation. We will know when we know. I can give you some good news. The good news is that I was down at the Toll Brothers development a couple of weeks ago. I got the virtual tour. They won't say it out loud, but they're not subtle about it either. They don't want children there. There are no amenities for children, no pool, no playgrounds, nothing. So could a child sneak in? Yes, I suppose they could. But I don't expect that particular development to add anything to the school population. The others, River Road, the skate park, and Charlie Brown's, will know when we know. In the meantime, the borough has its own what-ifs. What if the parking revenue from the train station doesn't come back? They took a severe hit on that. It was $400,000 on a $14, $15 million budget, and that is, well, it's tough to make up. The second what if, and it's an even bigger what if, is the volunteer fire department. If anybody here can tell me the name of the chief of the volunteer fire department, besides Ms. Weber, you don't count. If you took a survey of most school-age parents, they wouldn't be able to tell you who it was. This is the town's most undervalued asset. Take a look at those guys. They're all on the wrong side of 50. They're probably all on the wrong side of 55. We don't have any 25-year-old kids to do this anymore. And so we would be naive to think that we're not going to have to address that issue going forward, probably before the end of this decade. And you don't want to know what that's going to cost. So here is the greedy part, or the not greedy part. Your budget is $75 million. The borough's budget is 15. You're 5 times bigger. So coming to them with your handout is like Jeff Bezos hitting up his secretary for spare change. Brother, can you spare a dime? You have 2/3 of the pie. After the county takes its cut, the town has got to operate on 20%. There are going to be, going forward, there are going to be some expenses that the borough is going to have to address. And we're all playing in the same sandbox, and we have to learn to get along. At this point, your end of the sandbox is pretty big. So it's not so much that you are greedy, please don't get greedy. And that's that.
Okay, I'm going to close the public comment session. Again, we have an executive session, so there's really no more to comment on the pilot. We are way out in front of it and have been working on it, but Mr. Lois mentioned a couple times, and thank you for the math lesson, but we're way down the road and ahead of you on that. But you did say, how can you help out? As a township elected official, you can help out with the maybe increasing monies from the Charlie Brown property, the Arbor Skate Park, Arbor Green, the Dixie Dale property, and the Noe Pond property. So if you can help us with the township development, that would be great. So if you could all just stick around, we'll meet in the band room. Perfect, great.